sometimes being the perfect parent isn't so perfect. And what looks good on paper doesn't look as good in real life. And I'm going to start this with a story. This is about 6, maybe 8 months ago. I went on a play date with my daughter. We went to her friend's house and had dinner with the parents, and they played. Okay, and little side note here, when it comes to play dates, a lot of comedians joke about this. Comedians who became parents, they're like, it's quite funny, just the random people that you meet through these play dates, right? Because your kid and their kid, they're friends, but you don't know the parents. They could be anyone. And you tend to find yourself in these situations with people with whom you would never associate with otherwise, right? Your paths in life would never cross except for the fact that your kids get along. So, if you're single and you're like, I don't like these first dates. I'm over first dates. I want to get into a relationship to avoid first dates. It doesn't end. If you have kids, guess what? The first dates continue, except it's with the parents of your kids' friends. And it can be great. It can also be very awkward. So we went over to their house. And this couple, to be fair, they were very friendly. They were nice. They weren't bad at all. Okay, so yes, jackpot. When that happens, jackpot. However, there's one thing that really did stand out when it comes to their parenting style. And what stood out is every single thing that they were doing to raise their daughter, she's 3, on paper looked amazing, right? It's one of those logical plans that you would sketch out before having kids, right? Like, oh, when I have kids, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to start on that early, and I'm going to prep them for life. So they're really set up for success. And the couple, both of them worked in tech, right? So very logical, a little less connected to the emotional side of things. And like I said, logically, on paper, everything sounded quite great, right? Now, how did that translate off paper into real life? It was very strict, right? So I'd bumped into them before. We went to a bounce house with, a few of my daughter's friends, and they were there. And even at the bounce house, I noticed the father, for example, would be considered, a helicopter parent and was following his daughter everywhere and correcting her and giving her advice and checking in with her about everything, right? So all the kids are in this bounce house, jumping up and down, having a blast. And the dad's like, hey, do you need to go to the bathroom? Do you need to go potty? Okay, tell me if you need to go potty. Tell me if you need to go potty. Right? Or sometimes the kids would get a little crazy and he's like, oh, hey, don't get so crazy. Hey, come over here. Yeah, stay over here. Let's calm down a little bit. Right? And then again, just always correcting. At the play date over at their house, it was even correcting in terms of, hey, we don't say like this, it's like this. Right? Oh, it's the wrong word. You should be saying this word. Right? Correcting on everything. I also found out that their entire schedule is down to the T, right? It's like military camp. It's like our daughter wakes up at this time. Then during breakfast, because we're busy getting ready for work, we have a nanny that comes and that preps her for breakfast and also does a mini class during breakfast. Then they take her to daycare, and it's a multilingual daycare, so she learns multiple languages. We also hired a nanny who speaks another language, so she's now learning 3 languages. And the nanny then picks her up, does even more extra classes and homework at home. When it comes to toys, we don't really want too much color and flash and stimulus in our daughter's face, so it's wooden toys only, very neutral color and very limited amount of toys. And she has a very calculated playtime window. And then when we go to bed, we teach her more lessons, and the whole thing repeats again and again and again. That's the schedule. Now again, on paper, if you were like, hey, how do you raise the most successful child? Maybe you'd come up with something similar. Right? Hey, yes, teach them all the languages, get extra lessons, learn, no stimulus, etc. But how might that translate in terms of the kid's experience, right? One, and this is the first thing that stood out to me when they said this, is, wow, they really have very little contact with their daughter, right? Both of them work, again, in tech. They have two nannies, one that just lives with them. And it seems like the nanny's doing even some of the playing, does all the lessons, cooks the meals, eats with the kid, and the parents just see the kid here and there outside of their work. So again, to each their own. But it was interesting. I'm like, what would look good on paper here? I just sense like emotionally, again, logical parenting, emotional parenting. Perhaps this kid is craving more bonding, right? Not just through logic. And even when you're hanging out with your parent, you don't always want to just be doing logical learning or improving things. Sometimes you just want to be, right? Sometimes you want to goof around. Even when we were there, my daughter and her were playing together, and anytime, similar to the bounce house, they would get too excited, the dad especially would be like, hey, calm down. Now, as we talked about before in a previous episode, this can lead to suppressing that excitement. But ultimately, it was just very, very strict, right? With that whole mindset, we got to set our kid up for success, and we have to start early. But again, what about the emotional side? There's more to life than that, right? And this is something that I've actually personally seen myself and a lot of the clients that I coach when it comes to transformational work is the people who tend to be the most disconnected emotionally, right? Very, very logical, because they're disconnected emotionally and they can't resonate with that layer of life, of existence. The way that they make sense of life is purely logical, analytical, and it's through these little benchmarks of, did I win or did I fail? And that's what gives meaning. Look, I got a promotion. Look, I won this. Look, I did this. I got another raise, etc. That's what determines the course of my life and the success of my life, as opposed to what about the experience? Instead of a little check mark, what about the experience? But because there's less of that emotional side, they don't see it. Someone who's deep in apathy will fall into this. That's how they make sense of it, right? Then I do this, just very logical, goal-oriented. Nothing wrong with being goal-oriented, but hey, there's another side of things, okay? Now, you also don't want to go pure emotional, by the way. It's a good mix, but parents who tend to fall into this, okay, strict schedule, set them up early for success, benchmark, perfectionist as well. I don't know. It's not for me. I'll put it that way, right? This whole strict, putting yourself in the child's shoes, their experience, it's conditioning them ultimately to always improve, right? Life is about improving, not living. Improve. And it's very controlling, which isn't good, right? This will also tend to lead to rebellion later on, right? Like if you're like super strict, it creates a big eventually it's going to be, oh no, right? It's like, never have any sugar, ever. Oh, our daughter will never. She doesn't even know what sugar is. Hey, that just means that later on, down the line, your child is probably going to rebel and go on a sugar rampage, right? One thing I even noticed myself, I'm originally from Switzerland, right? And the drinking age in Switzerland for beer and wine is 16 years old. And then 18 years old, hard liquor, right? When you're 16, you can also go to bars. When you're 18, you can go to clubs. So drinking age for beer and wine is 16. And then, interestingly enough, driving age is 18, right? Versus America, where driving is 16 and drinking is 21. But what I've seen is in America, there's such a taboo around drinking. Once more, you have to be 21. It's this big deal. That people will go on these rampages, right? Like I hear stories of people even in high school just going insane in this form of rebellion because it's so taboo. It's so like, no, 21. As opposed to for myself and the people I knew growing up, it really wasn't that big of a deal. There wasn't that charge around drinking because even, at 16, you're like, okay, I can have a beer. It's just that, right? Like, okay, cool. But there wasn't all that binging. I've really not seen, even in high school, even in college, like there really wasn't that binge drinking. People would drink, sure, but it wasn't like, oh, here we snuck the bottle. Oh, it wasn't this big deal. So as a parent, you could say, hey, if you go super, super strict on stuff, eventually kid's going to rebel. Now, that doesn't mean go completely, oh, loose, yes, here, drink. No, it's finding a balance. It's finding a good medium, right? Not zero control, not too much control. It's like, what's that nice balance, and practicing that, all right? Being extremely controlling and strict also puts your child in a fear state, right? I talked about this in a previous episode too with bad parenting, right? Or you could, the book, but also when it comes to gentle parenting, parents who are just always checking in and every little thing is a big deal. Like, imagine in your life, there's someone just walking around, like someone just behind you, walking around, following you, and just correcting you on everything, right? Like, hey, don't jump too high on the bounce house. Oh, you said the wrong word. You should say it like this. Oh, don't forget that. Oh, manners. Hey, didn't we talk about this? What did I say before? Say that was happening at all times. Like even me with the podcast here, there's someone next to me. It's like, oh, Julien, don't put your hand up like that. Oh, okay. Did you miss a point? What did we talk about? Like, and I just know there's those eyes, like just judging, like you could say well-intentioned at a core, but just kind of judging eyes. Oh, the state that it would condition someone to be in. Right? And a state of fear, ultimately. You're just like, oh, am I going to get corrected? Oh, did I do it right? Did I do it right? And also, again, massive just perfectionism that will most likely follow them later on in life, right? Back to something I talked about in the previous episode with the prison analogy, right? If you think of the experience of a child in this world, you know, during their childhood, they're ultimately a prisoner, and whoever's raising them, they're the prison guards. Right? It's, hey, time for your bed, go to bed. They have no say. They're in a prison, right, from their perspective. Now, as a thought experiment, taking this analogy, what is happening here, or if you decide to go this route, I'm going to be very strict, everything will be controlled. You turn into that type of prison guard. The prison guard who, again, everyone's like, oh, like just way too strict. And guess what? There tends to be a rebellion. Your child, again, taking it out there in this analogy, taking the prison guard and prisoner, you're on their side, right? So imagine a prison guard on the side of the prisoner, helping them, and ultimately trying to navigate the situation so that the ideal outcome is, you know, the prisoner learned, right? They learned the skills to deal with life, but then you leave and you're on good terms and you're friends. If you're someone who's too loose, you try to go the friend route, and I've seen parents do this too. I want to be friends with my kids. I want to be friends. Look, friends. And yes, you're friends, but you can't disown then the other side of, you're also there to guide them and educate them and prepare them for the world and teach them about right and wrong and teach them about boundaries and values. And sometimes that means sitting in situations or emotions that aren't comfortable. Situations or emotions that go against, I want to be their friend. I want to just get along at all times, right? They don't need a friend from you. They need a parent. You're not there to be their friend. You're there to be a parent. Now, later on when they're older, moved out, so on and so forth, sure, be friends. There's still going to be an element of parent, but yeah, sure. But not at a young age like that, at least in my opinion. Right? I tell this to my clients too, by the way. I'm not here to be your friend. I'm here to be your coach. And I'll say things that your friends might be too scared to tell you. But hey, that's my job. You're not here to be their friend. You're here to be their parent. But that also means, again, be friendly. Don't disown that. It's like parent only. And I guess that's the trap. You get too sucked into this parent conditioning. And social media overblows this. Right? I talked about perfectionism. If you go down the parenting social media rabbit hole, there is so much advice. And just like any industry on social media, not all of it is accurate. A lot of it is, again, painted facades, these fronts, right? Look at what I did with my kid, this crazy activity and blah, blah, blah. It's not like that all the time. Here's how I deal with situations. It's not like that all the time. Even me with this advice, I'm not perfect all the time. So you can't be making these unfair comparisons. And that's what people do. They're like, ugh, that's what they're doing, and look at me. And then there's just so much information. The perfectionists like, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this. Oh, I didn't think of this. Oh, look, there's a fun game that this person is showing me on social media with your child, and it also helps them learn. I got to incorporate that game and this thing and this thing. And it's just this overload. No. Social media is not real life, and no one is a perfect parent, and no one has figured out parenting perfectly. Everyone's just doing the best they can with what they know. So don't fall for it, okay? Don't be like, I got to also do this and be the perfect parent. Hey, sometimes being the perfect parent isn't so perfect. Don't forget that. For me, that story really, in experience, really hammered it in, right? The story, again, going on the play date. I was like, wow. Logically, again, Dad is explaining all this, like, makes sense, but it didn't really translate because it's just logical. It was just on paper. And life is more than what's on paper, right? And I mean, I talked about it a bit here with the perfectionist parents, but also think of what it does to you, right? Like here we took the perspective of putting ourselves in the child's shoes, but what about putting yourself in the parent's shoes? Say you're the parent, like on that play date, you're just always micromanaging everything. And what kind of experience or existence is that? Like, oh, is everything okay? Is everything okay? Micromanage, right? You're always rushing to help the kid and correct the kid with every little thing. I mean, it could lead to parenting burnouts where it's like, oh, I just can't anymore. I can't go on like this. And you just completely burn out because you're just overloading yourself by making every little thing a big deal when not everything is a big deal. You also see the shift, by the way. Every parent, or you could say most parents with their first child, will tend to have a bit of this pull of got to be the perfect parent. Everything must be perfect. And then as soon as you have your second child, you're a lot more relaxed, right? So to get a feel for what I'm talking about here, just think again, first child experience, like micromanaging everything, worried about every little thing. Everything's a big deal. And then if you have a second or more than two, you're just like, a lot more relaxed. So ultimately, it's what I try to do is bring a bit more of that relaxedness into the schedule, right? I also have a schedule, nothing wrong with that, but again, it's finding that perfect balance of control, of improvement, of setting them up for life. But it can't be 100%. And if it is 100% too, and you burn out, it'll lead to you resenting your kids, right? It's like, you're doing this to me. That'll ruin the relationship. A perspective that I like to take on as well is if you think of yourself, I talked about this in the first episode, there's you and your quote unquote inner child, and you're in a relationship with you. Well, when it comes to parenting, don't forget that. It's not like for myself, I have 2 daughters. I don't view it like I'm the parent and how many kids do I have? 2 daughters. In reality, I have 2. But the way I view it is I have 3 kids. I have 2 daughters and my inner child and me and the relationship with me. And that also factors in, and you can't ignore that. If you do, again, it's not win-win, and the outcome won't be great. You have to find the win-win. And that also means scheduling time for you, time to recharge, replenish, so that the time you spend with them is quality time. And if you're micromanaging everything, you'll never even take a break. You won't even be able to do that. Okay, so don't forget about you. And I mean, another thing from their perspective is there's just no room to learn to, right? Like if you're controlling and fixing everything, like there's no self-authority, there's no autonomy, there's no room for them to make mistakes and learn from it because you're jumping in, right? A piece of advice my father actually gave me when my first daughter was born. I remember vividly, we were at dinner and I asked him, like, hey, if you could give me just one piece of advice when it comes to parenting, what would you give me? Right? I was just curious to see his perspective. And he said, let your kid be frustrated and don't always immediately rush to the rescue. Why? Because it teaches them how to deal with it, how to handle it, how to ideally process it in a healthy way. Now, again, this doesn't mean now, and it's very nuanced. It depends on the age, so on and so forth. It doesn't mean I'm just stay frustrated, stay crying, deal with it. Don't take it that far. But it's a good point where if you're just always jumping in, always fixing things, right? Anytime, like say they're even building a toy or a Lego or something and they can't figure it out, there's the urge to jump in like, here, I'll help you. But no, you got to let them sit in that frustration to figure it out. So if you're, again, micromanaging, controlling, being perfect, look, it's perfect, we're doing it. There's no room for them to do it. Okay. And I mean, another thing I wrote here on the emotional side, by the way, is be present with your kid too. I think that is extremely important. And there's a difference between being with your kid and doing with your kid. So doing paradigm and being paradigm. If you audit, and it's a good audit to do, say the past week, all the time you spent with your child or children, how much of that time was spent doing things, doing different activities, again, like doing, and how much of that time was spent with you being there with them. Now, it's nuanced. Of course, you can be doing certain activities and also being present with them, but the being is extremely important. Truly connecting with your child beyond just, look, there's an activity, look, we're doing this now, look, we're doing that. It's just actually connecting, right? Even just solid eye contact, something that happens less and less with these. Right? It's like, oh yeah, oh yeah. It's like you get a little flicker of an eye. It's supposed to actually dead in the eye and just being present. And in my opinion, that's something that's extremely important and that every child needs. And it's funny how our mind always rushes to, I have X amount of time today to spend with my kid. What are we going to do? What are we going to do during that time to make it fun, to make it interesting? Hey, what about just being with them? And it doesn't really matter what you do. Be with them, right? And even in terms of the doing, when it comes to play, it's important, in my opinion, to differentiate between what I call producing play and consuming play. So producing or consuming. Producing play, when you're doing that, when you're playing, you're at the cause. When you're consuming play, you're at the effect. So here's an example of consuming play. Watching TV. Right? Hey, let's sit down with my kid and let's put on a movie. I'm doing with them, yeah. But who's at the source of the playing in that moment? The television, right? The iPad, the phone. It's receiving end. As opposed to producing play, which could be using your imagination, right? Creating some story and playing together. You're at the cause of the play. You're at the cause of the fun. I mean, in a way for adults, that's what it comes down to with purpose, right? It's the producing action that brings you the most joy. When people out hear this, right? What's your purpose? They always jump to consuming. It's like, what do you like to do? I like to travel. Okay. Environments due to me. I like to eat. Okay. Food due to me. I like to talk to people. People entertain me. Okay. But what about an action where you're at the cause? And what's interesting, but also at the same time a little sad, is nowadays there's an endless way to play while consuming. All right, even a video game, that's consuming. A little game on your phone, it's consuming. There's endless technology everywhere. And going back to the story I started with, it's one thing to some extent that those parents got right with the toys. Right now, for myself, I don't just do wooden toys. I love pushing imagination. There's a ton of toys, but it's toys that you play with, not toys where you're just sitting there and consuming it. And that's the thing. Anything that fuels imagination, that fuels play, and you don't need that much. That's what I was saying. The father had it right to some extent, where even with some basic toys, what does it do? It creates a situation for the child to use their imagination and make something out of nothing, to create, right? And that's the most fun, by the way. For myself, if I think back to my childhood playing, two of the situations that probably stand out the most are one, playing figurines with my sister, And I remember even having these like Star Wars figurines, and we'd create these stories. So the toys would enhance the play, right? It was producing. And the other memory was playing with my friends when I was really young, out in the woods, right? Grew up in Switzerland, middle of nowhere. We'd go out in the woods and we'd play with sticks and play fight like they were swords. And that was it. And that stood out. It was so fun because we were at the cause of it. Now, what did I need to have fun? Just a stick. That's it. And with a stick, as a kid, I created something out of nothing. So if you're just overloading, here, there's this stimulus, it doesn't give them once more the room to create something out of nothing. The same with bored. Let them get bored. Boredom, you could say, is the fertile ground for inspiration for that play. It's like, okay, well, we could either sit here and be bored, or we can do something. We can create something out of nothing. And you got to resist the urge to jump in and entertain at times. Oh, they're bored. I got to jump in and entertain. That's what's the good thing on the book. No. Pause a second. See if they can summon that and self-entertain. Right? And that play where you're at the cause, the producing play, is the most fulfilling. Right? Like, if I look at my eldest daughter, one is she could be watching a princess movie, right? Part of a princess movie. She loves the princesses. And she could do sit down 10 minutes of that and have a smile on her face and be into it. Like, oh, the princesses. Cool. However, it will not bring the same smile on her face than playing hide and seek with her cousins, right? And running around playing hide and seek, like the screaming, the giggling. Hey, it's free. Hide and seek. You make something out of nothing. You're there. Hey, let's just play hide and seek. So play where you're at the cause. I love to encourage that. So that's the gist of it. Something to think about, right? Imposing the perfect schedule, being super strict, being perfect might not be as perfect. They might rebel. It might poison the relationship between the two. Maybe finding that good balance, allowing a little chaos to enter, might be good. I don't know. This is what I think about. And one last thing before I wrap it here. This is totally random, but a show where, if you haven't seen the show, watch it, Bluey. Like, can we talk about Bluey? It's that good. I actually got sucked in. I wasn't sucked in at first. And by the way, Bluey is probably one of the biggest shows. Every parent knows this show. I wasn't sucked in at first, but it got good. And I see little bits in there, and I'm like, and there's a lot of moments in that show too where they encourage and they show that producing play, like creating fun out of nothing, using imagination, these role-playing games and stuff. It really hits on that, the dynamic they have there. And I think it's really beautiful. Love everything about it except for the last episode. And I'll wrap with that. So a few months ago, I moved. Okay, so I moved to a different state with my family. And we're in our house here. And my daughter, where we lived before, would go to daycare. I chose to put her in daycare, and I can make a whole episode about this, but it's also important, in my opinion, for her to socialize with other kids and learn that. And it's a great environment, so there's a good balance there of the two. So she had to leave her friends and, again, move across states. And the last episode, most recent, of Bluey, and that's the one I don't like, they're moving too, right? The dad's like, hey, I got a job making more money. We're moving. And it's this long episode, and everyone was talking about it on social media, because I follow the parenting social media. And it's this great build-up. Like, all of it's great up until the end. And it shows, the kid's like, why do we have to move and stuff? So my daughters could relate, right? My daughter's watching it. She's like, oh, yeah. And I kept bringing up, like, see, it's like us. It's like us. And I thought at the end, because every episode has a lesson or morale, something to take from it. At the end, I assumed, like, okay, they're sad, and it shows them going through with it, and it shows something happy at the end where they're moved, and how sometimes, change is good, and it's worth, staying through the uncomfortable part of it. What a great lesson. Imagine that episode. But instead, at the very end, it shows them just change their mind, ditch the contracts, everything, and throw the for sale sign on the ground, and they decide they're staying. And the dad does that. He rips the sign out, throws it on the ground, and the whole family hugs the dad like, thanks for letting us stay. We're so happy now. The end. So I feel like it's the ultimate troll episode on any family that's ever moved, where it's like, ha, gotcha. You'll never be as good as the Bluey dad. So it was a very awkward ending. And then I was like, well, we moved, right? It's great. So anyway, Bluey. And hey, in Bluey, is it the perfect schedule? Strict, improve, right? The self-help schedule? No. There's a lot of messiness and chaos. You could say even too much. But there's a reason people resonate with that show. It hits on the same thing here, the emotional side of things. The stuff that you can't put on paper. The things that come before words. So, I hope this resonates. Until next time.